The term Mesopotamia, wasn't used by the Mesopotamians. It's later on, applied to them by really the Greeks, and it means between the two rivers, and between the rivers, meaning the Tigris and the Euphrates. As you saw in the quick little video, the Sumerians were the first to settle there around 5000 BCE, and much of what we have today, the wheel, first alphabet, comes from this great and early civilization. But we're looking at this period right here, between 3,000 years to 500 years before the birth of Christ. I'm sorry, you can't really see that, can you? So, really stark contrast to the Egyptian civilization in terms of their belief in the afterlife. Generally speaking, they're known as very pessimistic. And part of the pessimism has to do with, the society. Think of, you live in Egypt, the rotation of crops, orderly weather, you kind of get an idea of what it's going to be like. Whereas in this area, you have earthquakes, you have floods, you're not as isolated, so you have warfare. So you see death on a regular basis, and that affects your belief in the afterlife. No idea of salvation. Never, and generally speaking, the gods are seen very capricious, unreliable, and their afterlife is really concerned, or their mortuary collective, their religion is really concerned not pissing off the gods. Their gods are generally angered with us. We don't want to annoy them anymore. That could lead to more death. This god right here, in the Babylonian society, which is within Mesopotamia, is Marduk. In Mesopotamian religion, as Babylon grows, so does its god, or popularity in its god grows. So Marduk becomes the king god amongst all the other gods. And generally speaking, in Mesopotamia, what's unique about this civilization, is that every city has a god, right? And the pantheon of gods is based on the various gods we find in their different cities. I just think it's interesting that, just to give you an idea of the pessimism they have, think of their creation myth, right? In their creation myth, Marduk has this battle, with the goddess Tiamat. The first battle between the sexes, right? Man versus woman. And this one, man wins. And from her, he creates the world. Right? So when we talk about things like Mother Earth, literally in this tradition, Mother Earth is Tiamat. We are part of her body. We also have the first victory of the male over the female principle. To give you an idea of, again, the pessimism, this is a famous poem in this time known as The Righteous Sufferer. Some say, for those of you, we'll talk about Job, not Job. Job. This might be the earliest indicator of that tradition. And some say that Job himself was from Mesopotamia. But if you don't know who Job is, don't worry about it. We'll get to him. Just pay attention to this last line. I'm appalled at all these things. I do not understand their significance. Right. So here we have a religion that doesn't offer too much comfort. It's really interesting. I mentioned at the beginning of class, I think the second day, that religions in general, religious people in general, deal with that better. Okay? When we look at these various religious cults, religious people mourn better, they can face death better. There is an exception. The exception is their vision of God. So when we look at these major traditions today, the visions of God is very loving, God's a welcoming God, then you're going to want to be with him or her, right? So you're not going to be too concerned about the way you lived your life. In this tradition, though, it's very negative. So on the flip side, when we look at religions today, and people who are religious and how they die, religious people who have very negative conceptions of God. God is a judge. Like God's going to get me kind of idea. They tend to be very stressed out about the dying process and face death with a lot of uncertainty. So you can guess, and probably in this tradition, that's what they're doing. Death is a scary experience. The second creation myth that we have has to do with Elil. And basically the teaching is that he slaughters. He's getting tired of working the universe, and he gets tired of this one particular god, and he slaughters him, cuts him up. And from his body again, he creates humankind. And humankind, works the fields for him, pays homage to him, etc., etc. But humankind is too noisy. So he decides to send them famine, disease, and a great flood to destroy them. Where else do we find stories of great floods? Noah. We'll come back to that. This is a literary work. Basically, it's a poem. For us, it's very, very important. This is one of the earliest indicators we have of their religious practices / their belief in the afterlife. How many of you have read the Epic of Gilgamesh before? Okay. Has anyone heard of Gilgamesh before? No? Okay. Do you mind telling me the context?
It was the high school history class or history class, Joe.
Cool.
The context of where I read it?
Yeah.
History class. Yep.
So let me give you, for most of you don't know the story, so I'll give you a quick recap. So Gilgamesh it's like a god man. He's like a Hercules. Strongest man in the world, and he becomes the leader of this city called Uruk. But the people in Uruk are annoyed at him because he's not a very good king. So they pray to their god, or gods, and their gods create Enkidu. Enkidu is Gilgamesh's equal in all things. But the gods are kind of like messed up. They like seeing people suffer. And Enkidu, he doesn't harass Gilgamesh, but he actually harasses the people. He kills their livestock. He makes life very, very difficult. And to the point where people go to Gilgamesh and say, Gilgamesh, you're the king. You need to do something with this wild man. Do you remember what he does to tame Enkidu? If it was a high school class, you probably didn't talk about this. How would you tame a wild man?
Does he castrate?
No. You ever heard the expression "he's whipped"? What does that mean? What does that mean?
Control.
By whom?
The leader. The woman.
The woman, yes. So Gilgamesh goes out. He goes to the temple prostitute, right? Who apparently is very beautiful. Takes her outside the city. Says, "Take your clothes off. Wait there for Enkidu." Enkidu comes, and of course they are engaged in intercourse for many, many days. And afterwards, Enkidu kind of follows her back to the city and becomes a civilized man. Enkidu, what does that say about women in this culture?
Sex is powerful.
What is it?
Sex is powerful.
Sex is powerful. Powerful or powerless?
Powerful.
Powerful. Enkidu and Gilgamesh become very good friends, and they go off on an epic battle, right? And in this epic battle, they decide to kill this demon god, sometimes called Humbaba. It's kind of like a wolf type of monster. And they do kill him, but this angers another god, and she curses, not Gilgamesh, but Enkidu. So for the first time, Gilgamesh experiences death, the death of someone he loves very, very dearly. And he's scared. Gilgamesh is scared, and he does not want to die. So Gilgamesh goes off on his quest to find immortality. And he's told about this, and the correct translation is the Ancient One. He's told about the Ancient One, who's immortal. And so he goes off on this great quest to find the Ancient One. And he makes it he gets to the shores of this great, a river of death you cannot touch. And this ferryman comes over. We'll talk about the ferryman and other myths of the afterlife. This ferryman comes over, he allows Gilgamesh on, and he takes Gilgamesh to the Ancient One. When Gilgamesh gets there, the Ancient One says, I'll tell you the secret of immortality, but you have to stay awake for 6 full days. Right? And Gilgamesh fails. So Gilgamesh wakes up and he goes, I want to know the secret. And he begs and begs and begs. And then the Ancient One says, I'll tell you the secret. I won't tell you the secret, he says, but I will tell you of a plant that will rejuvenate you and give you new life. the bottom of the ocean. Of course, Gilgamesh being the superhero, he finds out where this plant is and he gets the plant. And he finally has immortality in his grasp. And he puts it on the beach and takes a nap because he's exhausted. But then a snake comes and steals immortality from him. Literally eats this plant. Where else do we have creation stories or creation myths of snakes stealing immortality from people? Not many, right? So there's interest. And these are nations that are, within the same vicinity. So he returns empty-handed, and he is utterly depressed, and that's where he comes to this conclusion. And this is from the last part of the Epic of Gilgamesh. So interesting enough, this would be the musical instrument they used during this time. And this is most likely how you would have dressed in this society.
Shiduri said, Gilgamesh, where are you roaming? You will never find the eternal life that you seek. When the gods created mankind, they also created death, and they held back eternal life for themselves alone. Humans are born, they live, then they die. This is the order that the gods have decreed. But until the end comes, enjoy your life. Spend it in happiness, not despair. Savor your food, make each of your days a delight. Bathe and anoint yourself. Wear bright clothes that are sparkling clean. Let music and dancing fill your house. Love the child who holds you by the hand, and give your wife pleasure in your embrace. That is the best way for a man to live.
Ergo, the meaning of life. So the Epic of Gilgamesh ends with that. So what's the meaning of life? To enjoy your life on this earth as much as possible, because in the afterlife there's nothing but gloom and emotionless and pain and the lack of all those comforts that you enjoyed here on earth. It's almost like an ancient materialism, right? But in this religion, though, clearly there is a belief in an afterlife. Someone say if there is one consolation, we're all in it together. So whereas in the Egyptian religion, the pharaohs and those who are rich have a much better opportunity to enjoy paradise because they can pay for those comforts. They can pay for the Book of the Dead. They can pay for the heart scare. Here it's no. Everyone eats dirt, rocks, and they drink dust. I mean, it's kind of like this very, very gloomy, expressionless state, the underworld. And by the way, again, the underworld means, for them, literally, straight down. That's when we get to the ancient Greek religion, we'll see that for them there were actually entrances to the underworld that you want to avoid. There are now, in terms of punishment and retribution, so what about those real horrible people? Do they kind of get what's coming? And in this religion, to some extent, but there is some ambiguity there. We don't have enough information about that yet. But we do have some indication that was the case in certain circumstances. But just pay attention to the types of people that are punished or blessed. Unquenchable thirst for those who disrespect their parents. Right? Are you disrespectful to your parents? That's to come back at you. Virgins and barren wives weep. You haven't had children, right? I mean, think about it. Again, in this society, put this in context. I mean, today, third world countries, poor countries, the top the 8, 9, and 10 causes of death. Top causes of death is childbirth. No difference back then. You know, many women died giving birth to children. And children in general were very, very valuable to the point where that's reflected in their beliefs in the afterlife. If you don't have children, you've done something wrong in this culture. At the same time, they make provisions for the children who didn't get a chance, the stillborn, children that are born dead, untimely death. You're closer to the gods. For those of you, women in the room, who've had many children, you have a special blessing, right? Because you've helped society. And then finally, if you died in a fire, you no longer exist. That's an interesting point. So some argue that perhaps that's because there's no way to memorialize you, because your bones just aren't there anymore. Just to give you
4,000 years ago, the cradle of civilization.
this is what the afterlife would look like.
Upon their return to Uruk, however, it is the wild man who is plagued by frightening dreams. He finds himself in the House of Dust, surrounded by the shadows of his ancestors. The spirit of Humbaba appears and curses Enkidu. Sitting at his bedside, Gilgamesh listens as his friend describes the netherworld. The house where the dead dwell in total darkness, where they drink dirt and eat stone, where they wear feathers like birds, where no light ever invades their everlasting darkness, where the door and the lock of hell is coated with thick dust. When I entered the House of Dust, on every side the crowns of kings were heaped. After 12 long days, Enkidu falls silent.
So again, that's the experience that he's Gilgamesh on his quest for immortality. So in this religion itself, I mean, there are 3 distinctions though. There's a heaven, but heaven is only for the gods. You don't enter into heaven. The netherworld, of course, the land of no return, is where all of us go. And then finally, the earth, where we live for a time, which is part of our eternal existence. And again, the goal is to enjoy your pleasures fully here as much as possible, because in the netherworld there is only eating of dust, lack of emotion. Just pay attention to this. So in other traditions within Mesopotamia, we have these gates of the netherworld. So when we get to Islam, pay attention to the 2 guardians of the gates of the netherworld, or the gates of the grave. Here we have Negril and Erzugal. And again, if you're allowed to if you're allowed to enter, they assign you appropriate place in this dust. And then finally, the cult of the dead. So again, much like in all these other religions, the cult of the dead is driven by the appeasement of the spirits that don't want to piss off your ancestors. Because if you do, they're going to come back at you. And they might become something like this, right? I mean, how many of you would live in a haunted house? Like, how many of you, if you found out your house is haunted, would move? Right? No? You would stay, Julie? Okay, fair enough. I had a student in my last class who claims her house is haunted, and she apparently enjoys it. She thinks it's cool, but and that's who's their own, right? But at least in this culture, you don't do anything with ghosts. You want to do everything possible to make sure that your loved ones do not turn to a ghost, which specifically means to honor them by honoring their bones, memorializing their bones. And this could also be done by offering food and personal items for the dead. So during the actual funeral and in the tomb, you would put personal items, for the dead, so that in the next life they can give them to the gods. So hopefully, maybe the gods might do something special for them. Probably won't happen. Perhaps they could even In addition to their dust, they might have that, piece of fruit. To kind of give them some sort of consolation. So they'll stay in the netherworld. You're not going to see them visiting. So the tombs were considered entrances to the dead. So you didn't want to mess with the tombs. You might let the ghost out. We find, in many cases, the tombs, simply wrapped in a shroud, but in the floors of their homes. Right? Brendan, why do you think they would keep the dead in their homes?
So they can make sure no one opens into it.
Absolutely, right? Because interesting enough, when invaders would come into these cities and take over, one way, and this way they would really get you. In addition to taking you over, enslaving you, killing you, they find the graves and they desecrate the bones. Why? Because now they're going to anger your ancestors, and those ancestors might come back and they're going to curse you and your children and your grandchildren. It's almost like spiritual genocide, right? I mean, so they really don't like you. That's what they're going to do. They're going to go after your ancestors. In terms of bereavement, there's no standard that we know of, but especially we do have some indication for the upper echelons of the elite. And generally speaking, 7 days with close relatives. So, like in this culture, and for some of you in your groups that we talked about this, when people mourn, what do they wear?
Horrible dark colors.
Horrible dark colors, right? Right? Is that true? I mean, let's say I die tomorrow, and you decide to go to my funeral, right? Let's say I died heroically, so now you have to go, because I'm like a hero in Buffalo. How many of you are going to wear bright colors? How many of you, you're going to wear bright colors?
I don't.
Just so you know, my mom is a tough woman. You may not be like letting the door, just so you know. How many of you, are going to wear short skirts or short, shorts for the guys, whatever? I don't know. How many of you are going to, show your stuff off, right? No, seriously. Are you going to dress like you're going, like in black, if you're going to a club? Are you going to wear that kind of clothes? No, right? You just very conservatively. That's part of the culture. Same thing here. Here, though, it would be expected, to tear the clothes as a sign of mourning, right? Don't try to tear your clothes. That's pretty difficult. That's pretty strong. Scratching yourself, right? Cutting yourself up a little bit. I mean, all these are signs of mourning, which we consider acceptable. Dirty, ragged clothes and matted hair. In some traditions, modern traditions today, we'll look at sitting Sheva in Judaism. We don't have this, but we do have this sense of you're not supposed to shower for X amount of days, because you're in mourning. And then professional lamentation. So, in many cases, we have professional mourners. Does that sound weird? In our society, have you seen professional mourners? No? How many of you belong to a Christian church community? Okay. You ever seen a funeral of someone who doesn't have family? Sorry. That's me. Insurance. It was in a car accident. It was really annoying. But anyway, where was it? So in many of your Christian churches, I guarantee you this: if you ever go to a funeral where there's only, let's say there's no family, or the family might be just the parents, usually the priest, minister, whomever's in charge will call people from the community and say, you know what, why don't we kind of help the people out by attending this funeral, out of respect. Where does that come from? Well, I mean, in a sense, they're professional mourners. I mean, they're not paid, but again, it's that whole notion of, you should be with, a crowd of people, with solidarity. We should be in this together when we're facing these, tough times. And that's all we have today for these ancient religions. Are there any questions? All right. Before we